And so we'd like to welcome on a member of the 1995 Hudson Valley Renegades, Scott Podsednik. And Scott, first of all, thanks so much for taking some time and just welcome sort of back to the Hudson Valley. At least I'm kind of sitting up here in one of the luxury suites. It's great to be chatting.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. 1995. That what is it? If my math is correct, 28 years ago. So oh, a lot of mileage on this body since then, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say that was your second year in pro ball. Just what was that season like for you as still being a kid, kind of just out of high school, having been drafted the year before, and then going so far away from home for the entire summer?
Yeah, I was drafted out of high school in 1994. So that 95 season was my second year of professional baseball. I had spent a short season in the Gulf Coast League the year prior. And to be completely honest with you, Joe, I was a deer in headlights both of those years. I came from a very small high school in Texas. The competition wasn't that great, a small 3A school. So to go from there to that elevated type of competition to the professional world, it was an eye opener for sure. I had no idea what I was doing on the baseball field. I had some raw skill, some abilities, but I had to learn the game. I had to learn how to be a professional, how to play the outfield, how to run the bases. Had no plan or approach at the plate, so it was just a learning experience from that point forward, and a growing up and maturing time for me as well. I was again from a small town, so getting up to Hudson Valley, in the bigger city and playing in front of fans, I had a blast with it. But I was no way, shape, or form ready for the major leagues at that time in 1995.
You talk about being drafted the year before out of high school. Was that an easy decision for you to sign with the Rangers at that point? I know it was, kind of leading right into the strike and a lot of other things that were going on at that point. Was there a thought of like, well, maybe I should not sign, go to college? Or was it just always like, hey, I got drafted high and I'm going to go and start the pro career?
Yeah, it was not an easy decision at all. I grew up wanting to play for the University of Texas. I was a Texas Longhorns fan. And so I was the second pick that year from the Rangers. And I had no idea what I needed to do. I liked the idea of going to start my professional career, but then obviously getting an education at Texas would have been a great opportunity as well. I can't recall exactly the reason why I decided to sign, but I went ahead and chose that route. It ended up working out for me. But no, at the time it was a little stressful trying to decide what would be, the best route. And look, there is no right or wrong answer. Now that I look back, there is no right or wrong answer. I could have blown a knee out the second week playing at Texas or the professional ranks. But fortunately for me, I ended up, gaining some traction, and it worked out in the end.
When you come to the Hudson Valley, you're managed by Bump Wills in 1995. What was Bump like as a manager? I know he was still pretty recently off his playing career, but just what was that experience like?
Yeah, I remember Bump impacted the team in a positive way. But again, at that time, I really had nothing to compare Bump to. I had Chino Katahia the year prior. So these were my first two professional managers. I came from, again, a small high school up to these two first seasons, and I really didn't know what to expect. I just recall trying to learn as much as I could about from Bump Wills and the coaching staff, and I needed development. So I remember just trying to ask as many questions and learn as much as I could from him. But I remember Bump been fun and exciting, and I enjoyed playing for him that 1995 year.
I know you guys were kind of similar, both speedsters, and kind of had that in common. Did you learn a lot from him from that, or was it more just about how to be a professional and carry yourself in a clubhouse and on a field throughout the grind of a season?
Yeah, both. We were similar kind of players. So I remember talking with him about, stealing bases, the footwork, paying attention to pitchers, patterns they fall into, all those types of things. But again, where I was being 19 years old and so naive, I it took a while for all that to sink in, and to actually learn that is one thing, but then apply it out on the baseball field was another. But yeah, I recall talking with him about those types of things, about being a leadoff hitter, about how to use your speed out on the baseball field. So I think it was a good guy for me to play under that early in my career.
When you come here and obviously the team had a really good season that year. Just what do you remember about that season from a baseball standpoint? You said obviously it was a lot of fun and stuff like that. What are just some of your favorite memories of being up here?
Well, it was 28 years ago, so there
Yeah.
wasn't a lot that stuck out. But what I recall was the amount of fans that showed up to those games. Again, I came from a very small school in Texas, and then the Gulf Coast League that first year we don't have any fans at all. So I remember being a little nervous playing in front of 2,300 to 4,000 fans, whatever they were getting at that time. And I just remember thinking, this is professional baseball. This is kind of, the start and what it's like. So I remember being so incredibly nervous that first game. I just remember I was literally shaking. I could feel my knees shaking in the box playing in front of that many people. But we had a really good group of guys. Before we got on, I went and looked back at the roster to refresh on some of the names. But I just recall having a good group of guys. I cannot tell you, Joe, how we finished or what our record was, but I remember having a good group of guys, and I remember that being a fun season.
Anyone from maybe not even necessarily that team, but just that you came up with the Rangers that you still keep in contact with, or kind of have some of those special friendship memories with?
Let's see. I exchanged text with Cliff Brumball years ago. Him, and let's see, I think I caught up with Venafro. He made it to the big leagues, left-handed sidearm pitcher, Mike Venafro, and then Ryan Dempster. We faced each other quite a bit when he was with the Cubs. So, but I don't keep in touch with any of those guys currently up to this point. I'd have to say Cliff Brumball was the last guy I've communicated with.
What, I know obviously for you getting to the major leagues once that season was over was kind of a journey. You left the Rangers, then came back and eventually got to the bigs with Seattle. Just what was that journey for you leaving the Hudson Valley to the time that you eventually got to the major leagues?
Joe, it was a journey and then some. Like I had mentioned, I was just so raw as a player there at 19, 20 years old. I had some physical abilities. I could run a little bit, but I had to learn the game. I had to learn how to be a professional. I had to learn who I was as a player, strengths and weaknesses, and then apply all those out onto the baseball field. So it was a growing up opportunity for me. I learned so much in the minor leagues. I think what kept me around was my ability to run. I ended up playing 9 years before I broke in, but I think having the ability to run is what kept getting me opportunities to go and play. And then I just recall, asking questions. Guys are telling me I have this ability. Well, why is it not translating, into me developing? So I started asking questions, kind of went to the drawing board and just started asking why. Why has this happened? Why is this happening? And finally came up with a plan, came up with approach, finally found a way or how to keep my body healthy. I struggled with injuries there throughout my minor league career as well. So I just finally caught on, finally learned how to be a professional, learned what planning and preparing was all about, and then finally got an opportunity in Seattle in 2001 and then with Milwaukee in 2003, and was able to take advantage of it and stay in the league for 9 more years.
You talk about what your game was, and obviously at that point in time, late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of speed guys. It was a lot of the guys hitting all kinds of home runs, and
right.
That's for other people to talk about, that kind of stuff. But do you feel like just the type of player you were almost hurt at that point just because the game was so much looking for those 30, 40 home run guys, or not so much?
Well, I was kind of caught in between in the minor leagues. That was kind of one of the things that held me back, was I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I could best impact a ball club. And, I got with guys who had been there before, and they said, hey, you gotta play to your strengths. Your strengths is your ability to run. You have good hands. You can put the bat on the baseball. And I finally realized that I wasn't going to hit a lot of home runs. I wasn't going to drive in a lot of runs. So I went all in at that leadoff style and tried to learn how to reach base as much as I could, and then really started looking into how to get myself to second base. Those early years I could run, but I didn't know what I was doing once I got to first base. The jump was something different, paying attention to pitchers, watching patterns, knowing what they're going to throw in certain counts, the game, knowing what situation you're in the game, the score, who's hitting behind me, all of these things, I finally started catching on to. And then in 2003, Dave Nelson was my first base coach, and he was a base stealer himself. And we communicated really well. And he taught me a lot about the art of stealing bases. So I just kind of figured out who I was, Joe, and just kind of went all in on trying to play to my strengths and figuring out kind of the best way for me to impact a ball game is to reach first base and then try to steal second base and get in the scoring position.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that 2003 year you had with Milwaukee, finished second in Rookie of the Year. Just what was it like to finally have that breakthrough? Like you said, hit a couple of cups of coffee with Seattle before that, but then finally you kind of latched on and were able to stick around for the whole season with the Brewers. Just
right.
What was that feeling like for you during that season? Like, I finally have this staying power that you've been looking for. And what was that whole year like for you?
So I broke camp with that team in 2003. I was a bench player at the time. I remember telling myself, look, you grinded for 9 years. You worked your tail off to try to get here. Now let's continue to work to try to stay here, and establish yourself. So it was around May 15th, I want to say. Me, and I don't know if you remember the name, Keith Ginter. We went and played golf that day, and I showed up I was just a bench player, but when I got opportunities, I felt like I played well. I was holding my own at least. But I recall coming to the field that day, and my name was in the lineup. So I was like, oh, that's strange, because a lefty was throwing. That's why I played golf. We were playing the Cubs. Sean Estes was throwing a lefty. For sure, I'm not starting. So Keith and I went and played golf that day, came to the park, and I'm leading off. And I'm like, okay, that's somewhat strange. So Eddie Perez, our catcher, pulled me aside during stretch, and he said, hey, they're not real happy with Alex Sanchez. They're going to run you out there for a few games. It's a good opportunity for you. Go play your game. And I remember, I think I went 0 for 4 that night. And I think I might have reached first on a walk. I got thrown out at second base trying to steal base. I remember going home that night, and I called my dad. I said, Dad, this is it. This is the opportunity I've been waiting for my whole life. I worked 10 years in the minor leagues. This is it. It's time to go. So that next night, I went 1 for 3 with a home run that actually tied the game in late. And then I ended up playing well, and they traded Alex Sanchez a couple of weeks later. And that was kind of me and, taking advantage of that opportunity. But I just, that minor league grind was so long, and I worked so hard that I understood that the window of opportunity in the big leagues was small, and I knew that I was going to have to take advantage of it. I probably put a little unneeded stress and pressure on myself, but I kind of feel like I played better under a little duress when there was something to prove. So fortunately, I was able to play well, stayed healthy, took advantage of it, and gained some traction.
That's so interesting, 0 for 4 caught stealing, but it wasn't like a, oh no reaction. Like I blew it. You're like, oh no, this is it. You came back the next day. Was that mental side of things? Was that always something that you did really well as a player and felt like you could handle just the ins and outs of a long season like that?
No, that was one of the things I had to learn in the minor leagues. I was terrible at dealing with 0 for 4s. I would go home and just grind over and bring a bat and thinking I had to change my mechanics night in and night out. That's a big part of what was holding me back. So I had to kind of develop that mental toughness and strength, and that the ability to deal with adversity. I had to learn that. That was part of what was holding me back. So, and then, from there, I got better, and I continued to grow and mature as a player. But I feel like up to that point, I kind of got there on athletic ability, but I still needed honing with the mental side, like you said. But I was a gritty player, though. I mean, I did go for 4, but I went home saying, "Hey, this is it," because I'd seen guys come up and get small opportunities, and you have to take advantage of it. Unless you're a first rounder and they give you a lot of money, you're not going to get a large sample size to go prove yourself. And I knew that, so I said, "Hey, this is time. You've got to go."
And then obviously, next year stealing 70 bases and all that. How long did it take for you just to feel comfortable in that? Okay, now I'm the everyday guy in center field. Did it take that whole 03 season? Was it shorter than that, or just when did you kind of start to settle in and be like, okay, I can be comfortable more in my role as a big league?
Yeah, it wasn't until 2 or 3 years after that, once I got to the White Sox, I felt like I had maybe kind of established myself as a leadoff hitter in the league. I still felt like I played with a sense of urgency in 04. I struggled a little bit offensively. I did steal 70 bases, but I hit 245. I had a really good rookie year. I hit 314, scored 100 runs. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, if I can do this my rookie year, I can be even better my next year. And that hurt me a little bit. I struggled offensively, but still, it was a great learning experience for me. I was learning a lot about how to steal bases with Dave Nelson. I learned a lot about myself in terms of plan and approach at the plate, more of kind of who I was and what I needed to do in the box. But to answer your question, it wasn't probably until 05, 6, 7, that I kind of started saying, okay, we can make a career of this if you can find a way to stay healthy.
Wow, that's just so that's interesting. Obviously, I know 05 going to the White Sox, and I know you'd moved around a little bit already before that, but maybe not necessarily after you had already had a little bit of big league experiences. Mm-hmm. Going to the White Sox at that point, obviously setting the stage for the World Series win that year. Just what was your reaction in moving to Chicago, and then just throughout that season as the year developed and you kind of got that feeling like, we might be able to go and make a run at this?
So I was traded during the winter after that 04 season, and I had been traded a few times in the minor leagues. So I understood at that point that it was part of the game. We're basically just commodities. And, the White Sox, I looked at it as a positive. The White Sox want you for a reason. There's something you bring to the table that can help this ball club. So I remember joining that team with Ozzie in 05, and they had hit a lot of home runs the year prior. They had Carlos Lee, Maglio Ordonez, but they weren't a good team. So Ozzie wanted to get kind of back to pitching and defense. He wanted some guys at the top of the lineup that could handle the bat, steal bases, run. He wanted a more athletic team. So that was why they brought me over. I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew nothing about the American League Central. So I get over there. So I'm new to the club. Jermaine Dye was new, AJ Przinsky, Tadahito Iguchi. So we had a bunch of new pieces that had joined that Sox club. We had no idea really what we had, but we started that season just on a tear. And then after about a month or month and a half, we're kind of looking up saying, hey, we might have something here. We had a great group of guys. We got along well. The chemistry was great. It was a very resilient ball club. Even if we had lost a ball game, I remember the attitude was just different with that club. We had good resiliency. We were able to bounce back and just, rode with that chemistry and, rolled that on into the World Series. But what sticks out from that club and then some of the other clubs was the group of guys we have and the togetherness we had. Weren't a lot of egos. Everybody was willing to do what it took to win a ball game that night. So it was just a magical year from start to finish. I mean, to grind 9 years, finally find myself in the big leagues, and then 2 years later, find myself lacing them up in a World Series. It was just, it was crazy from start to finish. It really was.
And not just lacing them up. I'm sure you get asked about it all the time, but in game 2, the walk-off homer, just what was kind of going through your mind at that? And even 18 years later, just, that's just got to be the most amazing feeling ever to do something.
No question. And Joe, it still to this day, it never gets old. I get chills anytime it's brought up. I mean, legitimately. Again, just to be, playing in a World Series was incredible. But then, we get to game 2 and just real quick, going into that at bat, I was, it was the seventh. I don't know if you recall the 7th inning, we were down 3. We loaded the bases. They brought Chad Qualls in. Konerko hits the grand slam to put us up by 1. So that was the loudest and the most chaotic atmosphere I had ever been in my entire life. The U.S. Cellular Field at the time was just going bananas. And I remember out in left field, the top of the 8th or that next half inning, I'd watch the pitch, but then I would shift my eyes to Konerko at first base thinking, what does this man feel like? He just hit a grand slam in the World Series to put his game up late in the 7th inning. And I'd watch the pitch and then I'd look over at Konerko and I'm just locked in on him. And he had electricity running through him. I could tell, his body language, he was just feeling it. I'm getting chills telling the story, but so before Konerko hit the grand slam, him and I were the only guys in the lineup that were hitless up to that point. So Konerko had hit the grand slam, put us up by 1. So I'm the only Sox guy hitless. I was 0 for 4. So we get to the bottom of the 9th, Juan Uribe flied out. So I remember walking up to the plate saying, look, we're facing Brad Lidge. He was slow to the plate. My plan was to try to reach first base any way you can. My plan was to get to first base, and first pitch, I was going to attempt to steal. That was the plan. So I'm getting up there. So take ball 1, ball 2. Joe, I step out of the box. I'm wanting to hack 0-2. I look over at Ozzie Guillen, and he's shaking his fingers like, don't even think about it. You take a pitch. So I took a fastball right down the middle of the plate. I step out of the box. Lidge was fastball slider at that time. I step out of the box. I said, you know what? There's no way he's going to throw you that slider 2-1. He doesn't want to walk you. You look for that exact same pitch. You look dead red. So I was sitting fastball. I got one right over the plate. I put as good a swing as I could put on it and hit it as good as I could hit it, Joe. And, I took off. I got every bit of it, but it was cold. It was rainy. It was to the deepest part of the field. So I was thinking third, but I was still curious because I got all of it. So I remember I just round first base. I look out to right field and I see Tim Raines throw his hand up, saw it leave the park. And then, Joe, I was just overcome with emotion and a feeling that I had never came close to experiencing at that point and never will in competition. I had the birth of my daughter was 4 years later. That's a different story. But in competition, it was just a feeling that it's tough for me to put into words right now.
Did you do you know what happened to the ball? Were you able to get it, or did it end up on eBay somewhere? Or?
I do have the ball.
That's awesome.
I do have the ball. The bat was in Cooperstown. They had a little display of the 2005 World Series champions, and the bat is still in Cooperstown in New York. So, I didn't hit any home runs the regular season. I'd hit one in the division series against Boston. So that was I hit no home runs during the regular season, but ran into 2 in the postseason. But by far that was the biggest hit of my career, and just the craziest moment I have ever been a part of, and probably will ever be a part of.
And obviously you played for through 2012, and what are you doing now that kind of the baseball career is over? Just what keeps you busy throughout?
I'm doing pre and post game shows for the White Sox for NBC Sports Chicago. Chuck Garfien is the host. Ozzie Guillen, Frank Thomas, and Gordon Beckham, we all do shows. We kind of rotate through, come in and do some certain shows. So I've enjoyed the heck out of it. It's been really fun. It's a great opportunity for me to stay connected to Chicago, the White Sox, stay involved in the game a little bit. So, but it is kind of funny, me doing TV at this point. I mean, I was such a shy kid growing up, very introverted, very quiet. So now to be doing live TV at this stage is somewhat funny to me, but it's been a lot of fun getting up there with Ozzie and Chuck and kind of letting it go. We enjoy it up there, and we hope the fans enjoy it as well.
How different is your relationship with Ozzy now that he's not your manager? You guys are just kind of doing this now.
It is different. You don't spend a lot of time around your manager. You're in obviously during the dugout, but he's got his job to do. I've got my routine and my preparation. So you don't really get to know the manager as like I've had a chance to do now. So it's been about 2 or 3 years since Ozzy's joined, and our relationship is so much different now than it was when we played. I've got a chance to see exactly who he is and vice versa. And I had a lot of respect for Ozzy back when we played, but I have even more respect for him now, getting to know him, getting to see how bright and intelligent and how much he knows about the game of baseball. He has forgotten so much about baseball that I never even knew. So it's a pleasure to do games with him. It's a pleasure learning from him and just talking ball night in and night out when I'm in the city doing games with him.
And obviously watching a lot of the game now with all the rules changes that went through at NMLB this year, trying to get more stolen bases. And I just wanted to, as a base dealer yourself, want to get your thoughts on it. Would you have liked, I'm sure you would have liked to kind of have some of these different pickoff rules and things like that. But seeing that in action for a year, like, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think the rule changes have been great. I haven't talked to one fan or player or anyone involved in the game that hasn't thought that these changes haven't impacted the game in a positive way. I would have loved the bases to be 4.5 inches closer back in the day, but I think what I would have liked more is the two disengagements. If that guy, you can get that guy to throw over now, he's going to be reluctant to burn that second one. So it impacted stolen bases. I don't know the exact numbers, but attempts were way up. That's what fans wanted to see. Major League Baseball reached out to the fans, and they were clear. They want to see athleticism out on the baseball field in more action. So with the shot clock, which has sped up the tempo, that has been great. We're seeing more athleticism in the defense, eliminating the shift now. So I think we're bringing back kind of a style of baseball, a smaller kind of game that the fans have been longing for, that the fans enjoy seeing. And everyone loves athleticism and speed. So hopefully, God, that will continue to trend that direction. There for a while, I can't remember the last time I saw a sacrifice bunt or hit and run or bunting guys over. We're slowly starting to see a little more of that, and I think it's good for the game.
Yeah, I was going to say just yesterday when we're sitting here recording this, Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman met with the media, and I think it was, or rather, Hal Steinbrenner said that he thinks there's going to be more sacrifice bunting for the Yankees next year,
right?
As that's a way that kind of things are going. Like, Renegades, we haven't had a sacrifice bunt since the 2021 season. It's been 2 full years since the last sac bunt.
Yeah,
it's like we've come close a couple times, but haven't been able to get them down fair. It's just
and the new GM for the White Sox, Chris Getz, was a teammate of mine in 2010 with the Royals, and we're good friends now. And I saw a little blurb of him talking the other day about trying to improve the athleticism of that club. He wanted to improve defense. He wanted to be more athletic offensively, wanted to make the stolen base part of the game. So each night, each game has its own kind of personality, and it goes a certain way. I just feel, look, home runs are great. Home run, you're not going to win a World Series without the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark, but you have to be versatile. You have to be able to manufacture a run when you're facing a guy that's on that night. You have to have some guys that can handle the bat, get themselves into scoring position. So, if you have that versatility and that way to score runs with the home run, and then obviously getting some guys over here or there, I think that's those are the clubs that are going to get to the playoffs and eventually win World Series.
That is former Renegades outfielder and World Series champion, Scott Podsednik. Thanks so much for joining us.
Joe, you bet. Thanks for having me.